Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Chillstream. I'm joined today with Vincent, who has some interesting developments in his analysis of the comically flawed secular Koranism ideology. I'll hand it over to you, Vincent, to start the show.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. So we just got done listening to Claire's stream with John, what's his last name?
I think it's John Gishala.
Gishala?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he showed up a couple months back, I think. He's been a YouTuber for a while, from what I can understand. I haven't looked at any of his stuff, but seems like he's pretty active in the various communities around pushing his. I'm not sure exactly what his ideas are. He seems to be pro people converting to Judaism, from what I can tell. You're muted, Vincent.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Um him and Claire got into a discussion, a little bit of a disagreement that really got me thinking. I find them both to be very disingenuous because they know a lot about the Noahide laws, but then see under the Noahide laws, the death penalty is called for idolatry, blasphemy, and so-called sexual immorality. So Claire always talks about how she wants the Jews to declare Christianity as idolatrous, but not Islam. And so therefore her secular Koranism would be kosher and she doesn't need to like worry about anything. Why she even needs this, who knows? Why she even cares about getting the approval of Jews for her secular Koranism, who knows? It's because she's really a Noahide. But see, according to her ideology, in the Quran, it doesn't specifically say to kill idolaters, blasphemers, and people who practice sexual immorality. So she says she wouldn't do that, whereas the Noahide laws call for it. So, my argument with her is that secular Quranism is not Noahide compliant. It doesn't reach the minimal standards of Noahidism. And her and John talk a lot about the Noahide laws, and John knows a lot, and she knows a lot. But when it comes to this, all of a sudden, well, we have to go get official rabbis, and we need to get official proclamations, and everything needs to be done in officialdom to find out whether secular Quranism is Noahide or not. I mean, it's a straightforward case. It breaks the rules. The rules are you decapitate people, and secular Quranism doesn't meet that requirement. So it's obvious that it's not Noahide compliant. And John won't admit it, Duvid won't admit it. They don't say, oh, it's definitely not, or that it is Noahide compliant. They just refuse to make a statement on it. And these people that know everything, and then all of a sudden, they just, because it's Claire, and because they don't want to alienate Claire, because they're most aligned with Claire, their worldview is most in alignment with Claire's, and she's the closest you're going to get without actually becoming a Noahide. 1 second.
Yeah, it's a good argument. Like, why wouldn't Claire just push for people to become Noahides if that's the major selling point of her position? I think it's because she wants the prestige of an established religion. Because for her, everything is about social prestige. That's why she fucked a married guy who was really old for 10 years because he was famous, right? So everything is just about looking cool. And I guess Islam looks cool to her. So Noahide, there are some Noah people that explicitly identify as Noahides, but it's not as big of a religion as Islam is. So I think that's my spec. Yes, I mean I can't confirm, but I'm guessing that's why she is pushing what she's pushing.
Well, that's the elephant in the room, is that she isn't Noahide compliant. And I hate she always does this. Whenever we confront her, or I confront her on the fact that secular Quranism is not Noahide compliant, she always says, well, the Jews have already decreed Islam to be Noahide compliant, and the Quran is Noahide compliant, so therefore secular Quranism is Noahide compliant. But she's not a Muslim. She doesn't preach Islam. I mean, Islam does call for the death of idolaters, blasphemers, and homosexuals. That's why it's Noahide compliant, but she doesn't call for that. She'll always, whenever it's brought up to her, she'll say, well, the Jews have already claimed that Islam is Noahide compliant, but she's not Islam. But John brought up an interesting thing today, and it made me think even more. And so his idea was that we don't need secular Koranism and we don't even need Noahidism, that people should just directly convert to Judaism. And his argument was because Judaism is the highest rung that you can obtain, so why not just go for the highest? And you know what I mean? Maybe there could be baby steps in between. But see, Claire's asking us, she's asking the Gentiles to stop at secular Koranism. That's the best that she's asking us to be. But above her is obviously Noahidism. Noahidism is a much more flushed out, intellectual, implementable, backed religion than secular Koranism is. So it's a lot more valuable. It's not all that much harder to follow than secular Koranism. Well, maybe it is a little bit harder to follow than secular Koranism, but I mean, she's basically not asking people to even, she's saying she's asking us to be with her one step below the Jews, because the Jews are asking us to be Noahides, and she's trying to bring us a level lower because she thinks it's going to be easier for us. But John brought it up. He's like, I mean, she's third rung. She's the trailer trash of the Abrahamic religions.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, I think it's important to kind of make a distinction that what is being pushed by the Abrahamists is not really a religion. It's a political ideology, which is used to get state power to get money. So it's a grift. So to see it as anything other than a grift is stupid, because we've all seen the people in Claire's chat. They're not good people. They're, some of them are okay. The ones who are opposed to Claire are usually better than the ones who support her, but it's not something they are doing because they care about people's spirituality. It's something they're doing because they see it as a way to make money. And that's hard for people like us to get into the mindset of that, because we don't really work like that. Like, we're more interested in answering the questions about meaning and existence and things like that. The grifting isn't really on the radar for people like us. So I think it would help us all to get into the mindset, or try to imagine what these people's mindset is, like what they say in the chat about these legal systems and all this stuff is just really them rubbing their hands, hoping to get rich off it, and nothing more.
All right,
And I
actually,
know it's
Claire's just messaging me now, and she said that she's hidden in your chats. I guess you decided to do that.
I didn't do it. One of my mods did it, but we have a policy here, like no harassment, no defamation, and try to keep it on topic. People aren't going to get banned in the chat for talking about stuff that's off topic, but we would prefer people to at least be tangentially talking about what the subject is, or relevant associated subjects. But yeah, unfortunately, Claire probably deserves more than what I've done, so I'm not going to back down on that, All I asked was to be treated with very basic rules of human decency, and she was completely unable to do that. So, build a time machine, Claire, and go back to when I might have cared.
Well, she just PM'd me. See, okay, this is the thing about Claire, that she's deluded. She says, I want Israel to adopt secular Koranism. Why on earth? I mean, she said the Judaism is obviously, even in her opinion, higher rung. And they already have the Noahide laws, which is obviously higher rung to secular Koranism. They have all this backing. They have all this history. They have all these texts. They have the state of Israel. They have Netanyahu. They have the United Nations. They have the government of America. They have the Freemasons. They have the Catholics. They have the Muslims. Why on earth would they step below themselves and accept secular Koranism? And the other thing that she does that I don't like is that she believes that secular Koranism could become a force, but Noahidism can't, even though it has all the support I just mentioned. She'll write back to me and she said, oh, there's only a couple thousand Noahides on Earth. That's a whole lot more than there are secular Koranists.
I just think she's a liar. Like, I think she's, I've talked to her about this, and her Well, expectation is that within a few generations, everyone will be a Muslim. So it is Sharia that she's proposing. It's just like a temporary, more secularized version of it until people are ready for the full thing, right? Like she fully expects everybody to convert because she's going to engineer the social pressures in the direction of people converting, right? Like she's going to blast propaganda on the TVs all the time about Islam being so great and create a set of social incentives where the pressure is predominantly on conversion, which is how this religion is spread in the first place. Was because there was a opportunity for people to make a lot of money off of it, and there's a sort of a human paranoia superstition where these religions have something, or these systems, these political ideologies have something compelling that sort of halts people's psyche into a holding pattern of fear of retribution. So
you're saying that this openness that you can practice other religions and you're not going to get beheaded if you're an idolater or a homosexual or an atheist is just old temporary?
Well, that's a different question, because what I can say, the thing that comes to mind is that she did a stream with Aaron Amahud, who just recently unbanned me in his chat. So thanks, dude. And they were talking about these, like, quote, unorthodox views on God. So, I mean, as much as there's a coherent vision of the Abrahamic God, any dissident views on that would be marginalized. So to me, that seems like a pretty unfree society, a pretty shitty society where the truth is persecuted because a bunch of people are superstitious and have an aversion to it, which is exactly what would happen. Now, you're asking about whether these things will come to pass if this secular Koranism becomes law, and that really, the way to get insight into that is to look at other places where this has been implemented and what the result has been with similar populations, because Iran wasn't always Muslim.
No.
Now, I don't know how far back you have to go to the point where it wasn't, but there has been a lot written about what happened when the caliphate took power there and the effect that it had on people. So Iran might be a good place to start to sort of see where that might go, but there's a pattern of a glut bureaucracy as well, so it would probably be a gradual thing, right? Like more and more laws would get proposed because people would say, well, this isn't in compliance with the Quran. And they say, okay, well, how do we make a law that's more in compliance with it? It'd be like a gradual chipping away. And whether it actually got to full Koranism or something else is really depending on the people that it's instituted on. But that will always be the compass through which other decisions are calibrated.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the other thing is that it's full of her own, like, did you hear that thing? I was on her stream the other day and she said that it was going to be her personal interpretation of wife beating in the Quran. So, I mean, okay, the Quran just says that you can beat her. It doesn't say how, it doesn't say with what or how hard. It doesn't say anything like that. And so she's saying that under her regime, she's going to label it, or she's going to define it as you invite over all your friends for a shaming party and then you slap her on the wrist and, everyone laughs at her. But I mean, that's not Koranism. That's her. I mean, she tries to make it seem like she's so logical and that she just kind of is a puritanical about the Quran, but it's full of her own subjective desires and interpretations and wills and whims.
Oh yeah, her political philosophy is totally a projection of her own sin, right? Her whole sexual degeneracy thing. I'm pretty turned off by the fact that she had an affair with a married man for 10 years and then blogged about it, presumably just because he was famous. That's not something that a virtuous person would do, not by a long shot. That's something a cynical, cloying, underhanded, selfish, greedy person would do. And nothing's really changed for Claire, and she thinks that she's virtuous, but she isn't. And that's the case for a lot of people. They think they're virtuous, and that belief actually gets in the way of real virtue, because virtue is a process. You have to keep building it. And as soon as you think you've attained it, you're probably on the path of losing it. I don't even
Well,
think Claire really ever had virtue, to be honest. I think she's just a very animalistic person driven by animalistic desires, which is why she can't control her desires for me and sends me pictures of herself in the bath, which are totally inappropriate and really demeaning to me because it's like not really acknowledging anything else that I've done and the importance of what I've done. So yeah, there is a logic to what she says, but it's a very cynical logic and it's really have very low bar for people. And there's a saying that people don't rise to low expectations and that's largely true. Like that's why my approach works cuz I have a high bar and people have something realistic they could aspire to and they get slowly better over time, which is what we want. Whereas if Claire's system were implemented, the laws themselves aren't even moral. So the only way for civilian morality to go is down because there's no role models that are actually worth looking up to. It's just a bunch of freaks and perverts and greedy pieces of shit who want to use the legal system to get rich. And that's really all it's ever been, unfortunately, which is why there's a trail of destruction in the wake of all these systems. We could see it very clearly. It's not as clear in the Commonwealth and in America because it's blunted by the force of the value of the currency. But if we could actually see the consequences of these beliefs, it would be a lot different.
well, I mean, what I think that we need to do is we need to kind of spread this meme that number one, secular Koranism is not Noahide compliant. Number two, it's like below Noahidism in any rung. So basically, why would you choose third best when you can become a Noahide and you know you have the Jews backing you? Who do you have backing you with secular Koranism? Claire? I mean, why would anyone accept that when they could get everything that comes with the Noahide laws? And I mean, basically, we need to make this a widespread meme that it's not Noahide compliant and Noahide laws are better anyway. So, what's the point of secular Koranism?
Well, she always says that the Noahide laws are like motherhood and apple pie.
I know, so,
And
but then why doesn't she just become a Noahide? I mean, I think she's being stubborn. I think that she thought that her secular Koranism was Noahide compliant, and I think that now it's obviously not. That she's just digging in her heels, and that's why she's asking me to get like certificates from rabbis, stating that her secular Koranism is not Noahide compliant when it's obviously not, because she doesn't call for executions. Um, she's just I don't know what she would do if somebody told her that secular Koranism wasn't Noahide compliant. Would she just continue down that road and continue with what she was doing, or would she just become a Noahide proper?
I think she would keep doing what she's doing because she's very narcissistic and wants her name to appear in the historical record. So she wants to have some sort of original thought that will be cataloged in the future, and that's her goal. She even wants statues built of her, which ironically would constitute idolatry. And she's not that intelligent.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the thing is that yeah, I thought that too, that if it came down to it, that she would just kind of give up on her morals and just continue with secular Koranism, even though now it's not approved of by the Jews. And because yeah, like you said, that she wants something that she came up with and it's her idea and her name is on it. And but I mean, in order to get rid of her followers, which are not that many, or to cast doubt on her leadership, I think that's the method to go. That it's not Noahide compliant and it's third rung. What's his name? John was saying, well, why not just become a Jew? Why not go the whole way? Why not ask people to do the full thing? And but the thing is that Claire says, oh, that's too hard. And but that's like, okay, that's like never asking people to go like, in the highest in the university. So Claire's going to have to admit that if people want to go higher in the university, they're going to have to go to Noahidism or Judaism. She has to admit she's like not the cream of the crop.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, a lot of these things are like political alliances. So you can't necessarily go to the scripture to check, right? If the whatever people are saying is accurate. And if you do check in the scripture, you might not get a clear answer, slash, the answer you get might not matter because it's primarily a political thing for money, right? So the scripture is not really anything other than I don't know. Like, it's not like you can point to scripture and say, like, oh, here you go, I proved you wrong, and then that's going to change anything.
Okay, well, politically, everyone's going to look at Claire and secular Koranism like, oh, that's the best. That's like okay, that's obviously for like the C grade. Okay, she's grade C. And I mean, but the thing is that, she's telling everyone that grade B and A are too hard. It's too hard for her. Okay, she's morally compromised according to her own system. I mean, she cannot live up to higher the Jews can, the Noahites can, people can do it, but she can't.
Yeah.
And she's trying to drag everyone down with her.
She wants to be punished. That's what it is. She told me she wanted me to punish her so that she could LARP as a martyr. Yeah. So that's sort of the cycle of it. This is how it goes. This first step is that people have a false conception of God. And then based on that false conception, they have false expectations. And then those expectations are disappointed, which leads to resentment, which leads to a hatred of God and a disbelief in God. And so what will happen sometimes is that these people who believe this way will start to misbehave because they want God to come and punish them, which is why you have this God as a punisher archetype so prevalent in so many of these systems, because there's a lack of faith, which is actually exacerbated by the beliefs because they're not true. It's a cope, right? The stories in those books aren't true. Therefore, they're something else. Therefore, they're a cope for something else.
So you're saying she's staying on level C because she wants to get punished.
She literally petitioned, I don't remember which government it was, but one of the governments that does the public floggings of women who have improper sexual relations. She actually asked them to publicly flog her, and they refused. Thank God.
What? She really seriously asked for that?
I know, the craziness never ends. But yeah, that's really what it says to me, is that she feels unloved by God and is misbehaving to get punished. And frankly, this pathology is quite common. All the misbehaving people who claim to be affiliated with, take your pick of a quote religion, which isn't really religion's political system. Yeah, that's essentially what they want. They want their faith restored in God. So they misbehave to get divine retribution. And that's something I don't think a lot of people can, if you're not in that mindset, I don't think you can really relate to it. You have to have more of a spiritual dimension, I think, to contemplate those things. But that does appear to be what's going on. No con-ops. Claire's not coming on. You can come on, though, con-ops, if you want to. You can tell us all about the drama.
Yeah, I don't mind having con-ops on.
Yeah, we love you, con-ops.
Is he coming?
I don't know. He didn't answer yet, but I'll send him the link. Well, actually, I don't know if I should, because he might share it with some unsavory people. Con-ops is a bit of a troublemaker. Misinformation agent.
Did somebody else give him that name? Someone else called him that and he took the name, right?
Con-ops? Yeah. He's under the name Spiritual Mamser now, so I think he lost the con-ops account.
His one email that he messages me on is ThoughtLover27, and I know he probably didn't come up with that himself. Someone must have. I think Claire calls him a thought lover, right?
That's his email, I think.
ThoughtLover27, but that's because somebody called him that. Okay, wait. Claire just sent me one of her blogs. Let's see what this is. What is this? Dear sir, I know you will find. Oh my God! Wait, it's on her. It's on her blog. The request to be beaten.
Yeah, I think she also has a public humiliation fetish based on her willingness to do this sort of strange thing. What would appear to be strange thing. But not so strange when you understand the sick and twisted pathology behind it.
Oh my god. Okay, I'm not reading through it. It's quite long. Oh wait, she addresses the Noahide laws in this. What is she? She addresses them in here, so it has something to do with that. um. Oh my god. So this in this long letter, she's asking a government to publicly beat her. Oh, and they responded to her.
Yeah,
Wow.
I
Wow,
know. It's
I didn't know Claire was like that. I mean, I didn't know that she was that crazy. Oh my god, I cannot believe that. I'm gonna have to
well,
read this.
we all have needs for socializing, and some people, for whatever reason, just can't make friends because it's just too. I don't know. Either they're too needy or they're too critical or what have you. But they still have their needs for human contact, so they end up like Claire, just basically not a burden to others, right? And that's how parasites are. They're a burden, and we haven't really acknowledged the parasitism going on to the extent that we should have, and we've been kind of in denial about it. So we just need to take a look at things and say, like, yeah, this is not a religion. This is a political system that is designed to extort money from people and enrich other people and nothing else. And it's simply a bunch of superstitious bullshit to get people to be more willing to give up their money and freedoms. And if people deny that, they're liars and they're immoral. And actually, Claire's rhetorical strategy would work very well for me because her arguments would actually work if I use them. But since we're against proselytizing in general, I don't use them. But it could theoretically invoke them at some stage if things got to the point where I thought that would allow us to do what we have to do to start improving things. Because clearly, as long as people still have a way to extort people through this bullshit, we're not going to make any progress because the mass of idiots will always be swayed by the paranoid and superstitious beliefs that emanate from these systems, which is why there needs to be a blanket ban on the promotion of false ideology to the exclusion of basically nothing. Only things which can be verified scientifically can be promoted as truths. Everything else is opinion. And I know a lot of people don't like that, but that's your fucking problem. And nobody wants what you're selling. Any of these systems that aren't real religions or just political systems, all of them are a problem. From Dave Martell to Noahide to take your pick, it's all bullshit. And there needs to be something to stand as a guardrail against this tide of bullshit because people will always get these schemes in their heads that they can come in and spook people into giving them money for some type of religious service. This type of vibe is what caused the Protestant split in the church because they were selling things that were supposed to be like a get out of hell free card or get out of purgatory free card. This is not new. And this secular Koranism is kind of like the final comical, ridiculous, like stage of what these systems actually represent.
Well, actually, she's doing what she accuses other people about. She says that people don't want Islam or people don't want secular Koranism because they don't want to follow rules. But it sounds like she doesn't want to follow rules. It sounds like anything above secular Koranism is too hard for her. And so she's watered it down so that she can feel good. But she doesn't want to follow rules. She doesn't want to follow rules.
She wants rules that she can continue her sinful lifestyle unimpeded, right? That's why she's all excited about, it not being a bad thing to have a lesbian relationship because she's, God. interested in me in that way.
It's not a crime. Lesbianism is not a crime under Jewish law.
She wants to have the prestige of an association with a powerful religion, as well as the freedom to be a sinful degenerate, which is the mindset of anyone who supports these religions. In spite of all that they've done, they're either willfully ignorant or bastards themselves. And that is a simple fact of life. Not every person who is stuck in these bullshit false systems is a bad person. They're largely just victims of circumstance, but until they acknowledge the nature of these beliefs, they are not going to be able to get any further spiritually and start on a genuine spiritual path. So I don't know exactly what the best route is, other than just a complete non-acceptance of anything outside of what you could call dharmic.
Well, I mean, in this day and age, you can't just ban it. You have to loosen it. You have to break it. You have to subvert it. And I mean, I think that we're getting on the point of what we need to do to subvert secular Koranism, that it's not Noahide compliant. She watered it down so that, you know, she could live with it, because she doesn't want to live up to the standards of the Noahide laws, which are more stringent than for secular Koranism. And she's going around telling everyone, you know, that they're not accepting it because they don't want rules. But then, you know, it's her rules. It's her, like, wife beating according to her. Like, okay, so she obviously doesn't want to get beaten in any type of hard manner. So she's watering it down because she knows that she doesn't want to follow that. I mean, you have to deconstruct secular Koranism and you have to rubbish it.
We don't want to be, I agree that it's good to confront the false statements of other people, but we don't want to be seen to be giving these systems more acknowledgement than they actually deserve. So it's kind of a walking a tightrope between ignoring it and making a bigger deal out of it than it needs to be. But I think in this case, we should talk about it, because there's a lot of very misguided people who are Christians that are in a very demoralized state, and they may just easily want to fall into Islam or secular Quranism or something like that. And I don't think that that is going to be good for anybody.
No, I know, but yeah, no.
Do you mind if I send John the link?
John Gishla?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Is he on?
He's in the chat. Yeah, I'll just I'll email it to him, John. I'll email it to you. I know you said you were banned in the chat, John, but I don't remember banning you, and it looks like your messages are still showing up. So I'm not sure what happened. But yeah, he'll be coming on in a minute, and ConOps, I guess, is just too afraid. What a shame. I'm sure ConOps could have offered us some very based, blue-pilled takes on all the stuff that's going on here.
But I mean, I think that it does. I mean, I'm of the thought that you don't necessarily have to freak out about it or make it look bigger than it is, but you do have to demoralize it. I mean, it is important to demoralize secular Quranism, and, you know, to demoralize Claire and to demoralize her followers. And I do think that I find too much that people don't want to take an active role in these things these days. And I do understand the point of ignoring it, but not everyone could do that. Not everyone should ignore it. There's, you know, it needs to be ignored by some, but it needs to be taken on by others.
I agree. I think if we're going to do that, we have to get into their heads more, because right now it's a lot of projection, and people seem to think they could shame people into changing, but you can't shame the shameless. And so you have to figure out what motivates them, and then make them realize that they're not getting what they want from what they're doing. And so it's hard to get into the mindset of basically psychopathic animals, but that's what we have to do if we want to head this off as a pass, because it will continue to spread, because people have their motives, and they tend to take the easiest way out. Welcome to the show, John. Thanks for joining us. How was your appearance on Claire's there earlier?
Shalom Aleichem. Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. It's always nice to talk to Claire. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, I caught part of it, or I probably caught most of it. It's too bad Vincent couldn't come on, but I guess Claire's tired of getting beaten to a pulp in every argument she has with everyone except me, which can be explained by her strange sexual obsession with me.
Well, actually,
Yeah,
on that,
I thought I was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, John. You say it first.
I guess I thought I was banned from the messages, but I was able to get through. Thank you. I guess maybe I wasn't actually banned. Sorry for saying that. I didn't want to. I don't
It's
want to
okay.
accuse you of something.
Oh, don't worry about it. We have, well, we do want to have as much free speech as possible, but we also kind of understand that when people are making death threats in the chat and saying absolutely atrocious things, especially about the panelists, like we do want to discourage that, but I don't think you were doing that, so you don't need to worry about it.
But John, so I'm a little bit taken aback and a little bit frustrated with you and annoyed because you know so much about Jewish law and you make definitive statements all the time, as well as definitive as they can be. But when it comes down to something very clear cut, like the fact that secular Koranism doesn't call for the death penalty for idolaters, blasphemers, and homosexuals, that all of a sudden, you, Duvid, Claire, nobody can dare. I mean, you don't even dare make an assumption at all, neither does Duvid. And I all of a sudden I have to go get certificates from rabbis and all this other kind of stuff. Whereas when it comes down to anything else, I mean, you seem to be pretty comfortable about talking about what the stipulation is under Jewish law and whether it would be accepted or not. But when it comes to Claire and it comes to this one thing, I mean, all of a sudden nobody can say anything. Why is that?
Hey, Conops, there was a tiny bit of hum coming through, but it's gone now. I think you're okay. Conops, welcome to the show.
You want me to make a definitive statement about what issue, about the death penalty, whether or not people should be put to death?
Why can't it's so obvious that if secular Koranism would ban the death penalty for homosexuals, idolaters, and blasphemers, that it can't be Noahide compliant. I mean, what I'm frustrated is that you and Duvid are able to make, you're able to sit and, talk about Jewish law all the time, but when it comes to Claire and secular Koranism and the death penalty, you're afraid to even say, well, maybe. I mean, I think that you're scared of losing Claire. I think that you're scared of alienating her and alienating secular Koranism. I think that you kind of wanted to be an ally. And I think that you know full well that anything that doesn't call for the death penalty for idolatry, blasphemers, and homosexuals doesn't follow the Noahide laws. I mean, I don't know why I have to go get a certificate from a rabbi. I emailed Ask Noah. They didn't get back to me. Claire says it's because they don't know what secular Koranism is or what I'm talking about. But it's ridiculous. I mean, that's like, why can't you say, if I asked you, is homosexuality allowed under the Noahide laws? You're going to say, well, I don't know. Go get a certificate from a rabbi. All this other nonsense. When it comes to the death penalty, I have to run around like a chicken with my head off to get anyone to even give me their opinion.
There's a statement in the Talmud that says that if the Bet Din, the religious court, puts someone to death every 7 years, it's a bloody court, that the judges are bloody and tyrants.
I wrote about that. No,
and so there's a
no,
so
John.
there's a
John,
rabbi that stood up.
That
No,
the
John,
oral
John,
and written testimony is not validated whatsoever. So
No,
it's to the point where if it's being said, it's more likely to be a lie. So we have to go based on literal evidence. What has the literal history been? Because the oral and written word not validated as true. Indeed, has been bullshit so many times that the default position is now that it's just bullshit. If it's being said, it's lies. Okay?
Actually, John, if you give me 1 second, I am going to get to that very part in the Talmud that you just said, that it's a bloody court. If they convict someone every 70 years or put someone to death every 70 years, it's a bloody court. That's talking about a very specific instance where where someone has committed a crime and has left the land of Israel and then returns and they're retried or something like that. I'm gonna find the exact thing in the Talmud. And
am I lagging or am I coming in all right? Because it for some reason everyone else is sort of like breaking up for me.
I can hear you okay. If you're having a bit of an issue with connection, my suggestion is to just rejoin, because sometimes the Hangout, for whatever reason, gets glitchy, and you should be okay if you come back in. But is there echoing, or we're just like roboting?
Okay.
Let me see. I put everyone on audio only, so maybe that will clear up the broadband.
Oh, awesome.
But yeah, okay.
Okay. Okay, here, let me read. It's a paragraph that I wrote. Below is the text where culpa. Okay, the text that I'm talking about is from the Talmud. It's Mishnah 2 in Tractate Makoth 7a. Okay. So these Jews attempt to deceive the Supreme Court readers into believing that many rabbis were unwilling to proceed with execution, while others did so only because they believed it would act as a deterrent to criminals. When the text is put in context, we see that it is that in this instance, the rabbis are speaking about a very special case whereby a criminal has been convicted, flees the land, and then returns to the Sanhedrin for trial once again. But the original witnesses to the crime are no longer available. In this case, two witnesses to the trial must state that the criminal was tried, and they must say who the original witnesses were. One rabbi states that such a judicial procedure done every 7 or even 70 years would make the Sanhedrin murderous. Yet the text shows the rabbis are confused by this statement and don't know whether or not this is meant to be condemnation or a simple statement of fact. The rabbis then discuss a way to test whether the two witnesses to the trial, not the original witnesses to the crime, are sound. They simply pose questions about the trial to the two witnesses. If they are unable to answer simple questions, they prove to prove they witnessed the trial, it is recommended the person is not to put to death. So they're talking about something very specific there. They're talking about someone who is tried, left, is brought back to the Sanhedrin, but the witnesses to the two witnesses who spoke out against him are no longer available. So now you have to find two witnesses who actually watched the trial, and then you bring in those two witnesses and you ask them about the trial. And the rabbi says, well, if we do this once every 70 years, it's a murderous court. No, of course, if you're asking two witnesses to a trial, the original witnesses are gone. You're asking two people who witnessed the trial to come in and witness against, the person on trial. Yeah, that would be very stupid. I don't even know why they would even allow that. But they're talking about something very specific. They're not saying that, the Sanhedrin shouldn't execute people. That's a lie that Jews throw at us all the time to make, you have all of these wormy arguments to try to lessen the ire and lessen the suspicion of the Gentiles. You do the same thing with Kol Nidra. When you read the Jewish Encyclopedia, if you read the fine text, yeah, Kol Nidra is a way to lie to Gentiles. But I mean, then they go on this big verbose tirade about how it's not really a way to deceive humans. It's a way. It's a never mind. I don't want to get into that. Forget what I was just saying. Let's just stick to what you just said about the Sanhedrin being murderous if it kills one person every 70 years. It's a very specific case. It's a very specific case. Hello?
But it sets a precedent. That's usually that's how we see things now. So that since that was established, that you don't murder someone.
No. Yeah, but they're talking about when the witnesses are gone. They're talking about the people who witnessed the murder are not there anymore. You can't call them up as witnesses. They're gone. So then you're going to ask two people who witnessed the trial to come up and witness. Yeah, that would be murder.
Right. I understand they're talking about a specific thing. but the concept of a bloody and murderous court is a concept that I hold to, and most Jews adhere to. Like that's how we view things. We view things that as if a court is seen as bloody, then that's a tyrannical court. We see, huh?
It's
like we also see it as a way. Like we also believe that the judges should find every reason to acquit the person. Like there should be always someone willing to advocate for innocence too. Like there's also the Talmud also talks about how if the judges all unanimously decides the person is guilty, then there's something wrong with the court procedure. Or if they all say he's innocent, then there must have been a bribe, and there's a bribe that might have. Huh?
That's not what it says. That's the Talmud's giving a very, very specific stipulation. It's not talking generally. They're talking about something very specific in a specific case. And why it's murderous. They're not talking about generally. And back to the thing with, decapitations and you and Claire and secular Koranism, it's at least theoretically.
Well, I mean, how many people were executed by the Bet Din?
Yeah, I know.
Hold on a minute. This is not about whether other people have done bad stuff. This is about someone coming in here and trying to tell us how to live, and that you know better, and that we need to submit or we're going to be killed. So the burden of proof is on you, I'm afraid, to look at the historical record and think, yeah, that was what the fuck happened there, and was it good and was it bad? How many people have been killed in the name of Christianity and Islam since their inception?
Yeah. Well, I did write on that.
John, you have an answer, John?
Billions of people who were killed by Islam and Christianity.
So were those righteous deaths, or were the people who killed those people now going to be karmically cursed for many lifetimes to reincarnate as disgusting ghouls?
I don't know if they're going to be reincarnated, but obviously
they definitely are, because everybody reincarnates. Everybody reincarnates. No way around it. Everybody, every single last person, every one of you schlub fucktards is coming back here for all fucking time until you're enlightened.
Guess
how
possible.
fucking hard that's going to be. Guess how many fucking curses are on your heads for your bullshit over the last thousands of years, and how fucking hard it's going to be to get enlightenment. So suck on that egg and have fun. Have a lot of fun with all the people who will will you out of enlightenment when you start to go for it. That's what karma is. There are no actions that happen in a vacuum. So basically what you're saying is you're promoting a false religion. We should be doing it under pain of death.
Well, I don't know who you're talking to like this, because I wasn't the one going around telling people what to do. Well, I wasn't.
But
I guess you didn't even watch the stream, because that's not what I was saying on the broadcast. Were you even listening to what I was saying?
Well, what is
I said people have a right to believe.
I said the history of Noahidism?
Well,
I could care less what the history.
I think the history matters quite a bit, though, doesn't it?
Let me jump in on that, because he was bringing up. He said, "Well, has the Sanhedrin ever killed anyone?" And I wrote about that in the Talmud. There are at least 2 instances where a person was executed. There's another 2 where it was at least possible. The Talmud was a law book. They weren't necessarily sitting down recording executions all the time. And the other big thing that you have to keep in mind is that for the vast majority of its history, the Sanhedrin was under foreign rule and did not have the power to met out the death penalty. So just because the Talmud doesn't say a person was executed for not following the Noahide laws doesn't mean it didn't happen, or didn't mean that the Sanhedrin never executed anyone. We know that they did in the Talmud, but they were also barred from doing that under the Romans and under other occupations.
Hello?
Hey, Conops, welcome to the show. How's it going? Why don't you share with us your thoughts? Did you catch Claire's stream earlier?
No, I actually didn't. I just heard her speak in the morning or something about secular Koranism again.
Wow, that sounds out of character.
Really, doesn't it? Right?
I'm shocked. Yeah, a little bit. So you've had a pretty crazy couple of days. How are you managing?
Yeah, very, very crazy. I didn't expect it to be this crazy. I mean, internet drama is intense, but when it's about you as well, it's even more intense.
Yeah, I've been in the center of a couple of those vortices over the months. Of course, no one gave a shit because I'm subhuman, right? And I exist only to be humiliated and abused by a bunch of retards on the internet, right? And there's no karmic consequence to that, right? So there's somebody in the chat called Rabbi Liety who wants to come on. Does anyone know who this
Is
person
he a
is?
real rabbi?
I think that's probably Brundlefly.
I highly doubt. If it was Brundlefly, he could get in touch with me in other ways. He wouldn't be going through an alt. So, Rabbi Liety, you got to tell us a little bit about yourself, because so far all you've said is that you want to talk about symbolism, which basically tells me you want to come on the show and start Wignat posting. So if you don't have a specific topic, like all the people on the panel right now, I already know them. Hey, Gandalf. I already know these people, so I'm kind of used to streaming with them, but I've never talked to you before, and I don't really want to torpedo this stream. So can you tell us a little more about what you want to talk about? It will be okay to let you on, but if this is just shenanigans and we're going to figure it out in 2 seconds, not really interested, because we kind of have like a theme going here.
But wait, is John still here? Because I want to finish the conversation with him, or is he gone? Can he hear us, or is he?
He's here, but he's muted.
Yeah, I'm here. If there was something to say, I mean, I'm just being. I mean, it's just shouting at it. It's not really a discussion going on.
No, John. So, look, even theoretically, secular Koranism is not Noahide compliant, and I mean, I think that you have personal motivations, and so does Duvid, for not. You're able to talk about everything else definitively. You're able to give out, you think that the court is murderous. You're able to make statements that, did the Sanhedrin ever execute anyone? You have all this knowledge, but when it comes to this one little thing, all of a sudden we need to get certificates from rabbis, and they have to be. It can't just be any rabbi. I mean, I think one time she asked me to get it from the chief rabbi, but she's saying that, it's not going to happen because they're not going to understand what you're talking about. They're not going to understand why.
What exactly is this certificate for? Like, secular Koranism is something that's new. I mean, that's something that's just. I mean, I just heard about it just last year or whatever. So,
no, a certificate that it's Noahide compliant. It's logical. There's nothing else in those laws that's absolutely obvious that you take exception with. It's only the death penalty under secular Koranism. That's the only thing that you seem to not be able to come to a point and say, well, if secular Koranism says that homosexuals, idolaters, and blasphemers are not to be executed, then secular Koranism, in theory, is not Noahide compliant. I don't know what's so hard about saying that.
I mean, the way she was explaining secular Koranism to me, it sounded just like the American Constitution. So I don't really understand it completely. Like someone needs to really explain. Like, she didn't even really get.
Do you think in the American Constitution, women are whipped because they're sluts?
Well, that's not how she put it in the screen. In the stream, she was like saying, like, well, it's a political system where people have the right to be who they are, and you're not, you can practice whatever your faith is. And I'm like, well,
but that's not Noahide compliant. That's not practice whatever your faith is not Noahide compliant.
Noahidism is a voluntary system that someone joins into.
No, it's not voluntary. Schneerson, it's not voluntary. The Noahide laws existed before the Jews.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it did.
It's a belief. It's a belief within Jews.
You don't agree. You have this minor, small opinion that the Noahide laws come from man. They don't come from God. This is all bullshit. I mean, you're the only one who believes that, John. All these other rabbis believe
it comes from the Midrash. I can show you in the Midrash where it talks about that Shem and Aver had the first yeshiva and made up the Noahide laws. It's a belief that Noah's son Shem founded the Noahide laws. But it's only a religious belief.
How could it be voluntary if it calls for decapitations? How could that be voluntary?
Right.
You could ask for it.
you can vote for it. I want to get killed, like Claire. Like, I want to go to a Muslim country and get whipped. Because it's a thing that you take onto yourself. It's not something that's forced on you.
No, but yes, if you're asked to establish a court, all we need is a Noahide to establish a court. with the support of Jews, Muslims, Freemasons, the Catholic Church, the United Nations, the United States government, all these other people that have signed on to these Noahide laws, all you need to do is set up a court of justice. A court of justice to do what? To execute those who don't follow the laws. You're talking about the first people that become Noahides, that's voluntary. Once they have an army, it's not voluntary.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Like I
Rebbe-
put a picture on the screen here, and this is when the Jews paid the Arabic Muslims to invade India because they want to institute a caliphate there to make a bunch of money off it, because it's not a religion, it's a political ideology to get money. So this guy here in the image refused to convert to Islam, and so they sawed him in half. So does that seem like a good idea?
That's
Karmically
Noahide
speaking?
compliant.
So there's
they
a
didn't
little
behead him.
preview. There's a preview of what's going to happen to
They
all the
didn't
good
behead him.
people.
He was supposed to be
Well,
beheaded.
To all the moral
Rebbe
people,
disagrees.
to all the moral people who oppose this type of fiscal parasitism, that's what's in store for you in the future.
I have the
Well, the
quotes
Rebbe
from
disagrees
Rabbi.
with Vincent, because Noahide signed the agreement with what's the president that America is a Noahide nation. So obviously, I mean, the Rebbe believes that Americans are Noahides. So there's obviously something going on there if they're not executed.
He also said that if you can't convince them through force, convince them through pleasantry. He did say that. And he said that he said it was founded on Noahide law. He didn't say that we're practicing it now or that we're in compliance. He didn't say, oh, well, because gay marriage is illegal in America, that means gay marriage is Noahide compliant. That's not what he said. He said it was founded on that. Is gay marriage in Israel Jewish? Is Israel a Jewish state, because people are getting gay married? Or is it a Jewish state? Well, I mean, it's not really a Jewish state, because, I mean, if it was really a Jewish state, it would be a theocracy and it would be running like it's supposed to out of the Talmud and the Torah. But, I mean, it's obviously its foundations are Jewish, but that doesn't mean everything that's going on inside Israel is Jewish.
Yeah, you can move to Israel and get gay married. It'd be legal.
I know it is, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that gay marriage is Jewish compliant. It doesn't mean that gay marriage follows the strictures of Judaism.
Well, the way it works in Israel is, as far as I know, that you get a marriage certificate through the Rabbanat. So if you want to get married as a Jew, you have to go to them first. So the secular marriage is through the state, which is not really a marriage. I mean, it's kind of like a farce, really. It's like they consider the real marriage through the actual rabbis, and the secular state is just like a certificate that says, the state acknowledges that you're a homosexual marriage.
Okay,
I mean, that's really the way it works.
Even if the chief rabbis over there did give their blessing to gay marriage, so all of a sudden now, for Judaism, for Jews everywhere, gay marriage is gay marriage is
that's not
Jewish?
inconsistent. That's not inconsistent at all, because they've never been particularly interested in policing their own people. They've only ever wanted to meddle in our affairs because they can get rich off it. John's not going to talk to the Jews who are behaving poorly. He's coming to blab to us. The proof is sitting right here on the stream right now.
Well, I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean,
It's a grift. It's a grift. It's a grift.
I talk to mostly. I mean, my channel is mostly towards converts. I mean, that's who the majority of people I talk to. I don't usually. Sometimes I come on these streams and talk to people, but that's not really the highlight of my YouTube career or whatever you want to call it. Like that. That's really towards people that choose Judaism. Like, that's what I'm fascinated about. Like, I like that. That's what I'm interested in. So, I'm not really interested in Jews and what they do because or Gentiles what they do, because this is a free world and a free country, and you can live the way you want to live. I don't believe in telling someone else what to do. But that's not really
true, is it? Though that's not really true, is it? Because there's all these all these people.
Whether it is in reality or not,
it's not really how it is.
Yeah, we all are. We all wear shackles. Yeah, we all behooving to masters. Correct. Yes, on a literal level, yes, sure, right. We're indebted to the credit card companies, the pharmaceutical companies, right? Big pharma, right?
Well,
Whatever.
that's not what I
I'm
am
saying.
saying at all. That's not what I'm implying at
Well,
all.
no, go ahead. Sorry to finish your statement.
Well, the question is, who should be telling other people how to do religion?
Well, no one should be telling anyone to do religion. No one should be telling anyone to do anything.
Really?
John, those are you have these very kind of personal opinions that I've never heard from any other Jews. You have these very kind of like, your Judaism is not mainstream at all.
Right. Well, I don't represent. I mean, I like I said to Claire today. I mean, I represent myself. I represent my views and my opinions. I come from a Jewish perspective. Sure, my religion is Judaism, and I use the Torah as the foundation. But yeah, I mean, if that's good. I like that you say that. That's good. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, I guess. But at the end of the day, the Torah is the basis, and I try to keep it somewhat biblical, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're right. You try to keep it biblical, but when let's talk about what I really liked and what I was talking about with Jen. I don't know if you heard it, that you were basically telling Claire that she was setting the bar too low with secular Koranism, that basically she was giving people an excuse not to, obtain the highest level, which you say is Judaism. But I would also think that you would believe that Noahidism is a bar higher than secular Koranism, wouldn't you? Would you deny that Noahidism is not a bar higher than secular Koranism?
No, I don't even think Noahidism is good enough for Noah. I mean,
No, but is it
it's
better
not
than
even good enough
secular
for a caveman.
Koranism? Is it better than secular Koranism?
Uh, I don't even really know how to rank it, to be honest with you, because to be honest with you, I don't really understand secular Quranism. It's like a political ideology. It doesn't really have anything to do with religion, so it's
What about
sort
the
of a
fact
little
that it's based
different.
on the Quran and not the Torah? What about that?
Huh?
What about the fact that it's based on the Quran and not the Torah? Couldn't you just go from that fact right there? The big, huge, glaring elephant in the room?
Well,
It's
yeah, I definitely
Quranism.
agree that Islam is definitely superior to Noahidism.
You believe Islam is superior to Noahidism?
Oh, absolutely, sure,
Why?
sure.
Why?
Because a Noahide doesn't. You don't have to. I mean, even you make fun of it. You capitalize the N and the O. No hide. Like it's all about no. Like it doesn't say
Well,
to
that
do
is what it
anything.
is all about. It's about essentially worshiping Jews.
Oh, okay, so there's no real merit in worshiping Jews. I mean, that's an
Well,
aveira.
that
That's a
is
sin.
idolatry, John.
Right, it's a sin. I mean, that's what I just said. It's an aveira. I mean, you can't worship Jews. I mean, that's silliness. I mean, you can't worship
Yet it's
anyone.
going on. It's already happening. There's these Noahide places that worship Jews.
Okay, so what Islam teaches people is that they should pray and have a relationship with their Creator directly. That there is no worshiping rabbis and Jews
That doesn't
and
mean
Wait,
anything
wait,
because I've got an article here. This Messianic Zionist religion that wants to recruit 7
oh
billion
god.
members whose believers worship Judaism but can't practice it. Like I'm looking at this article right now, and you're saying, "Well, I don't think that's true," but I'm saying I'm literally looking at it. What am I supposed to make of this article here?
Which group is that?
the Noahides.
Yeah, but where are these Noahides? I've never really seen them. I mean,
They
Noahides that are
have small
non-Jews.
congregations. They're everywhere. They're all around the world. I mean, if you just go on Facebook and type in Noahide, you'll find their groups and stuff like that. Go to their websites. Go online, type in Noahide. You'll find Noahide websites, Noahide Africa, type in Noahide Japan. You'll find Noahide Philippines, Noahide South America. You'll find them. They're on there.
Okay, and it's not just one branch of one organization or something.
No, it's many different organizations.
All right, so
Yeah,
if
the
you're,
Noahide
if you
thing is
would,
actually kind
if
of
you would
big.
estimate how many people,
Well,
would
it
be,
says that there's 20,000, but yeah, it says that there's 20,000 Noahides.
that's not a lot.
No, it's not a lot, but you don't need the Noahides because the United States government has already signed on to it. The United Nations, Freemasonry, Catholics, and now it has Islam on its side. So you don't even need the Noahides. Their numbers are insignificant. That you have everyone else that can do it for them.
Yeah, the goal is not to get Noahides to like take over the government. The goal is to use the government to turn everybody into a slave, aka Noahide, aka if you do one thing bad, you get your head chopped off instantly, like that image I shared earlier. This is the fact. These are the facts.
Okay, yeah, but
People can
I don't
deny
see anybody working for this at the moment. I'm sorry.
No, when you
they've
talk
been
about
working.
Okay, do you know any
Conops.
politician that is actively saying, all right, so
Conops, they've been working for this
somebody's head
since
needs to go?
Babylon.
No,
Conops, this is what's been going on since Babylon, dear.
They passed.
Yeah, but it's not going on now.
No, yes, it is. They passed Public Law 102-14 that says that the Noahide laws are the foundation of the American civilization, that it is our responsibility to educate the population on the Noahide laws, and that our president at some future date in time will sign an international scroll with other heads of state promising to return the world to the Noahide laws using education and charity. The United Nations
Okay, but isn't this just some interpretation of the Noahide laws that is quite modern? Like you have this.
What do you mean modern? How does killing homosexuals ever become modern?
Well, I don't think anybody's lobbying for killing homosexuals in the United States.
Yeah, there are tons of people doing it, but that's even if there nobody is, that's what the Noahide laws state. They just, I mean,
okay, but you know that when people talk about religion nowadays, right? So if, for example, the president is talking about Islam, he always says like, oh, he quotes this quotes these passages out of the Quran that are completely innocuous, right? They're not going to quote, I don't know, like slay them wherever you find them, right? I mean, it's these modern interpretations. So you have this thing called Judeo-Christian culture, as many people would call it, especially neoconservatives. But that doesn't mean they actually want a literal translation of these Noahide laws in the government. They just want to have so-called the modern spirit of the laws.
No, but what do you mean? What are the 7 laws? No idolatry, so that's against freedom of religion. No blasphemy, that's against freedom of speech. No sexual immorality, that's against freedom of sexual expression. And you have to set up courts of justice to enforce these laws through decapitation. Even if they're not doing it, just in theory, it shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be there just in theory. Just in theory, it doesn't belong there. It doesn't belong in the United Nations. It doesn't belong in the Vatican. It doesn't belong in Freemasonry or Islam or anywhere, but it's in all those places. And people are working for it. The Israeli government is working for it. The chief rabbinate is working for it. Netanyahu is working for it.
The Israeli government is not even executing homosexuals. So, I mean...
No. But
we went over this before. They don't police their own people, Conops. They're only interested in instituting laws on other groups because they make tons of money off it.
But
that's the only reason
right now. I mean,
they control the entire, all the world's governments are controlled by them, Conops.
If they control the entire world with these Noahide laws, I would have seen more beheadings, and I don't see them.
No, it's not banking, stupid. They control the world through banking and putting laws in as a slow process.
We would have seen more beheadings then. If the
Noahide laws, the point is that it's a balance. They only go as far as they think they. They only go as far as they only go as far as they think they can get away with. So obviously, they don't think they can get away with beheading homosexuals or whatever it is that they would do if they could. But the fact is, this has happened since Babylon. These types of draconian laws have been instituted since Babylon. In Europe, if you promoted reincarnation back in the day, you'd get killed. Okay, so that's the normal. And because there's been all these advancements, people are more civilized now, so that they're more suspicious of these brutal laws, but they're going to try to keep bringing them in to whatever extent that they can, because that's what they do.
Yeah,
okay, well, the draconian laws have been in existence everywhere. I mean, it comes from Dracon, which was an Athenian lawgiver.
They're not stated to be the foundation of American civilization, and we're not stating that we're going to sign an international scroll with other heads of state pledging to return them to to these draconian laws through education and charity. It doesn't say that. The United Nations hasn't signed a proclamation saying that whatever draconian laws are obligatory. The Catholic Church doesn't say that whatever draconian laws supersede individual freedoms. Look, you're of the school where we're just supposed to believe they're bringing in these laws, they're doing all this, they're setting all this up. This is all being set up for nothing. All of this, it's all on paper. Kill homosexuals, kill idolaters, and they're bringing it in. The United States government is working for it. The Israeli government is working for it. But don't worry, because nobody's getting beheaded now, and they're just doing this for absolutely no reason. I mean, do you really expect people to listen to that?
No, I think what they think is that they're bringing a modern interpretation of these laws. I don't think they literally, even if people, if people are talking about the Old Testament, so like the Ten Commandments, nobody's, I don't know, is going to be put to death for violating any of them.
But they shouldn't.
Only that thou shalt not kill.
They don't allow idolatry. That does not. The 10 Commandments should be out of the court. Even if they're not killing people, those 10 Commandments shouldn't be there anyway.
Yeah, exactly. The burden of proof is on you,
I know.
Conops. Why should this book be dictating anything about statecraft?
I don't say it should, but I think
it is, though, right?
I think you're just getting paranoid over the likely application of these laws in a literal sense.
I'm going based on history, Conops. I should be afraid because there's been genocide after genocide after genocide since Babylon, and they always seem to target
genocide everywhere.
That doesn't mean anything. They always seem to target the smartest people, so you'd be on that list too, Conops, for death. They don't want anyone smart to survive, and that's been the process since Babylon. So I'm just saying, like, we go any further down this path, people are going to be so retarded they're never going to be able to get back to anything like that's not a clear-cut tier legal system, because they'll just be too stupid to actually be part of a society that has what you call a shaming culture around sin and vice, which is how our societies have been traditionally arrayed until this whole LARP into this desert cult started. That is why the situation is what it is now. It's been the same pattern since Babylon.
Yeah, I just see a lot of genocides everywhere. I don't think there's particular horrible genocides.
But you don't know anything about the genocides that were carried out in India. You don't know who was genocided. And you're saying, they're all the same.
I know a lot about
but they're not the same, because when you carry out a genocide on your own people versus you get a bunch of people to carry out a genocide on another people on your behalf so that you can make a stack of cash out of it, do you understand how that is a different type of thing?
Yeah, just like they're getting Muslims to sign on to it. They're going to use Muslims to do the genocides. There's not enough Noahides to do it, and the Jews aren't going to do it. That's why they're getting, like Claire, they're getting the Muslims to become Noahide compliant. They'll do the work for them.
I don't think that Muslims and Jews are particularly on very friendly terms at the moment.
No, have you read, Conops, you don't fucking know anything about the Noahide laws. Everything that you said shows that you haven't even read a fucking thing.
Well, that's very true.
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, just listening to you sounds stupid.
I'm not sounding stupid. I just want you to explain why they would implement these laws in a literal sense, and I don't think that's the case.
If this said everything in reverse, if what it says about Jews, it said about Gentiles, you would never. I mean, this wouldn't even be a discussion. You'd be like, yeah, that shouldn't be. Who cares if they're going to implement it or not? It shouldn't be the government. The United Nations shouldn't be making these proclamations. Israel shouldn't be involved in this. You know what I mean? But because it's in reverse, all of a sudden we all just need to calm down and shut up. Don't get rid of these laws. Leave them as they are. Let all these governments in the United Nations, the Catholic Church, continue with their little game that they're playing. I mean, you would never suggest that if it was in reverse. Never.
Well, I don't particularly care. I just don't think it's a big threat. I don't think. I mean, I'm against this. I'm against it, but I'm not like, how would you say, like a paranoid or scared that people are going to
sign up.
In the West, for example, are going to execute homosexuals. I think what is a much bigger issue for you guys is that in a lot of regimes that don't really care about the so-called Noahide laws, homosexuals are being killed.
No, they do care.
Everywhere.
Islam is going out of its way to get documents with Jews that Islam is Noahide compliant. Islam has always been Noahide compliant. Maimonides said it. Christianity is not with Noahide compliant. They're going to these Muslims to get their sword. They're going.
But even Maimonides, when I think it was the Almoravids invaded in Spain, he said there were none people worse than the sons of Ishmael. I mean, it's more how would you say, it's
lies,
more ambiguous than you think.
I gotta go.
Thanks for coming on, Vincent.
All right.
Appreciate it.
I'll talk to you guys later. Right,
Oh,
bye.
That was intense.
Well, he's been on this no hide thing for a while, so he's pretty passionate about it. I think it's
That's true. It's like me against Claire, something like that, about secular Koranism.
Well, I don't think you want to become a Muslim either, Condoms.
No. Don't particularly feel the need.
Well, that's what would happen. It would be
Muslims have a very,
it would be a convert or die type of situation.
yeah, but they have a strange system in general. I mean, they forbid everything in life what they promise in heaven. So if you go to the Islamic heaven, you get all your women, you get all your wine, stuff that's not allowed. You get even served by boys and stuff. It's a bit strange. Their heaven is really weird.
Well, heaven's not really a concept that was really ever present, at least in the same way that it is in the Abrahamic tradition and Indo-Aryan traditions. So you, of your own heritage, like I take, taking it on faith that you are who you say you are. You're a Dutchman, i.e., you're European descent. Of course, that's going to seem weird to you because that religion didn't come out of your people. But for them, it makes total sense. It works. Maybe, I don't know, because I can't speak for them. But because it is in effect in so many places, one has to accept that it does do something to some extent to keep things going. Like it's not like I don't know a whole lot about Islamic countries and how things are going there, but
not particularly well.
Well, it's been a quick expansion because of it's a political ideology for money.
Well,
So
yes. Well, Muhammad was not just a prophet, but also a statesman, and he had to fight war, and he wanted to fight war. So I think because there were such a, how would you say, militant desert people, and with that religion, it actually rewards conquest. They took over half of the world pretty quickly.
Yep. Well, think about it like, why does a snake look different from a deer?
Ooh, why does a snake look different from a deer? Well, there's very different explanations for that.
Well, they evolved under different circumstances, right? The deer evolved in a forest, and the snake evolved in a more arid desert type climate, right? So the snake has a certain personality, and the deer has a completely different personality. And so to take this example to humans, like the racial origins of religion tells a lot about the race, right? So this is proof that you're a different race than the race that created Islam, which is the Arab Jewish race, which is just one group.
Yeah, but you see that religion can work for people, even if it's not the originator of the religion. So people in the Caucasus, for example, were very white.
It didn't work. You said it didn't work,
well,
right?
But it doesn't work anywhere. It doesn't work even for the Arabs.
It's kind of tough because it's like, what's your acceptance criteria for a religion, quote, working, right? Like I can name you my own acceptance criteria for a religion working, but it's sort of hard to like know exactly like what people's state of mind is, right? Because like, does it matter what people's day-to-day state of mind is? I think it matters a lot.
I think the people, even in the Middle East, want more wealth, less war, more progress, more science, but they don't have it because I think the religion sets them back.
That's one possible explanation. But did they have any of that stuff before they had the religion?
Well, for some of the people who were conquered, yes, the Mediterranean, but also, I mean, the cities, especially the cities in like northern Africa, were very sophisticated. Syria was very sophisticated
because it was colonized by Indo-Aryans in the distant past, right? They're the builders of civilization. So
I'm not so sure.
You need to point to me something that was built to show me a civilization built uniquely by Arab or Judaics.
Arab or Judaics?
It's the same. It's the same race. What separates the Jews from the Arabs is
the Semites. You would.
They have different. Well, then, if you want to say Semite, then that means coming out of Africa, which means you need to include what you traditionally think of as Africans. But yeah,
Well, I think the Muslim civilization was, and it was very powerful and it flourished
no,
for a long
that
time.
is because of that is because of the predecessor religion, the Indo-Aryan predecessor religion, that they can say, well,
You
there's
think
a golden
in Mali, people
there
were
was a
very
golden age. There was a golden age. Yeah, but what happened to the golden age? It collapsed within what century? So it's not obviously Islam didn't cause that. Islam caused the collapse of the quote
well. You could
golden
argue
age.
that, but you could also argue that that was because of cultural reasons. There were a lot of reasons why
Well,
people
that's
in
a
the Middle
meaningless
East
statement. That's a meaningless
close their
statement.
minds. No, I don't think it is. There are lots of reasons why Islam closed its mind. I mean, there's a very interesting example. So in Islam, especially in the 9th century, there were a lot of people who took a lot from Greek philosophy. They're so-called the Aristotelian or the Islamic philosophers. But this discussion ended, and the Muslim leaders decided that the path of rationality wasn't the path to go because it would lead to kufar, unbelief. So in the 13th century, you have this guy called Al-Ghazali, who so-called closed the gates of ijtihad. So you couldn't reinterpret the religion anymore. There was no renewal. And therefore, Islam became stale. And you will see ever since the 13th century and the 14th century, Islam has regressed.
Okay. And you're saying it's because of cultural reasons, which is essentially nonsensical. It's not really an actual argument.
I think it's an argument. I think it's a good argument because it would also explain why a lot of these cultures in different circumstances, also with different ethnic groups, you see sort of the same phenomena because the culture was sort of all-encompassing, but genetically people were very diverse. I mean, you can go from the Caucasus to Mali to Pakistan to Indonesia. People had very different ethnic origins, but they shared a common culture.
And that culture was what?
That culture is Islam.
Okay. But it wasn't really Islam because there's no such thing, really. It's just you started out with a religion, it became Islamized, and the result was some other thing, which is a combo of basically a Judaization of the original religion, which is the same as Christianity, right?
Well, I would say that there were, I mean, at first, what you would see is like syncretized religion, just like you did in Europe when the Christians sort of conquered, or how would you say, evangelized the European continent. So you would see the same in places like Indonesia or in Pakistan or whatever.
Right.
So people had like a mix of old beliefs and new beliefs, but slowly you see this process of Arabization. So religious leaders became more and more oriented on the Islamic homeland, and also took ideas from them and implemented them. So people became much more dogmatic as well.
Right. That is what happened. So I don't know where that leaves us exactly, because I don't know exactly what we're even disagreeing on at this point.
Oh, it was genetics versus culture. And I, of course, took the cultural.
Well, culture comes about from genetics, and then culture can be modified by ideology.
But by the way, how did you like your own performance on Halsey's with JF? I thought that was entertaining.
I thought I did pretty well. My only thing is I got a little bit triggered and annoyed at JF because did you see the first time I went on his show?
Yeah. I definitely saw that one. Yeah.
I didn't think that went very well.
Jennifer.
Yeah, I didn't think that went very well. Like I got a few of my ideas across, but it wasn't really much of a. I didn't think it was as good as the one yesterday. Honestly, I thought the one yesterday actually did go into a few concepts, but people for some reason had a hard time with the moon binding the water to the earth.
Yeah, I also had a difficult time with that, I have to say.
Well, I guess it's not self-evident, but it seems like it would be imprudent to deny the role of the moon, even if we don't understand it fully.
And that is true. But isn't it possible to have an atmosphere without a moon?
I'm pretty sure some planets do, like Venus, you could argue has an atmosphere, right? But our atmosphere is very special, right? Like it appears to be the case that you need very specific conditions for life to arise. So an atmosphere doesn't appear to be enough. But it could very well turn out I'm wrong, but from what I can tell, the moon plays an important role because it's always creating a tide, because it's sort of swirling, it's spinning around the Earth, and it's sort of lifting water as it goes around. And well, you understand that the moon causes the tidal variation, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So it's basically just that. It's like, would we have life if there wasn't this constant mixing? And I really doubt it, honestly.
Mhm.
It just seems like we're always kind of changing, right? Like if there was no mixing, life could theoretically arise, but then there wouldn't be pressure for life to become more complex. And it does appear that there's pressure for us, the life here on Earth, to become more complex, right? That's why we don't see mammoths anymore, right? We don't see dinosaurs anymore, right? So there's something pushing things forward.
You would say that the moon drives evolution. Well, I would say, I mean, on your point, yeah, of course, like there's more complexity, but I also think that in some way, complexity makes it more likely for an organism to survive. So I think that's why you have this increase in complexity. But there's nothing mysterious about it, I think. Even though I don't know all the
pretty
details.
mysterious. I mean, if you really go to the very bottom of like what is space and what is time and all that, it is kind of mysterious. So maybe you just haven't understood why it's mysterious, but to think that it's something you could brush off as simplistic or not worth knowing is to misunderstand the importance of the teaching. I guess it isn't really mainstream, is it, that the moon is the part of the reason why we have life?
Yeah,
I guess
no, it's not mainstream, and therefore I think me and Jean-François Guérépi have some trouble with it.
Well, I guess I've been thinking about it for a really long time, so it's pretty clear for me. In terms of accepting it as a theory, I would say just like play with it, think about it, and it's one or the other. Either it does or it doesn't. And if it does, then it's a question of a degree, right? Like, is it 10% responsible? Is it 50% responsible? We don't really know things like that, so we have to like look at individual parts of the problem separately. Like, for example, how does life arise from non-life? That's a big question, right? Like, how do you go from random elements to, let's say, an amino acid? Do you know what the shape of amino acids is?
No, not really. No, they're like
They're
these,
they're
like, little
fairly
white
they're
balls.
fairly simple. They're fairly simple molecules. And amino acids are the building blocks for proteins. So
Yeah,
I'm just
I know that.
looking it up real quick. So I can use my model to predict the appearance of amino acids because it can very easily use entropy to build that up and prove why that state would be chosen versus other states, because it is in a sense inevitable that all the possible combinations will occur at some point with some probability because it's always mixing. So if you have a bunch of different elements, like just imagine everything that was on Earth but way in the distant past before there was life. So all the stuff that's here now was there back then, except maybe we've had a couple of comets impact the atmosphere in the meantime, right? But mostly it's been a closed system. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah, I know, it makes some sense. Yeah.
So it becomes a problem of answering the question, like, what was it that caused these elements to recombine in such a way that they became self-replicating?
Yeah, well, I mean, you have trial and error, right? So the fact that, well, I think what scientists now believe, and I'm not sure if I'm right about this, is this primordial soup idea, right? I think that's the most mainstream explanation now. So I think it is possible to have all these sort of elements in atoms and whatever mixing together, and at some point, by large like process of trial and error, at some point you have what you get, RNA. And,
Exactly. And so you can understand that something happens and you get, I'm going to just say an amino acid, because the RNA is comprised of amino acids, right? So RNA is already a further step down the line.
Mhm.
But if we just hold it at amino acids, and arguably those aren't alive, but they're the building blocks for life. And we can see how they would come about through chemical reasons in this, quote, primordial soup. Now that, like everything else in science, is a model. And the question is, does the model make the predictions, right? So to say that it was a primordial soup isn't actually making any predictions, because we have to ask ourselves, like, how did it go from that to this, which is clearly ordered in some way, even though that order isn't self-evident. There's order to the universe. You can see it in like snowflakes and different shapes of like spiral plants and stuff. There's some sort of shape to things, right? So the way to look at the formation of life is that eventually it came about, and the process by which it came about was by mixing to the point where eventually something came into an array that was able to use other elements in the environment to duplicate itself. And that was the first single cell. Now, once that happened, you're going to have a colonization of the surrounding area, right? Because if it's possible for something to duplicate itself, it duplicates itself once. Now there's two of them. Now those two things are in some sense identical to the original. Maybe there's like, I don't know how much you know about DNA replication, etc.
Oh no, I'm really a novice.
I'm
in
oversimplifying
biology.
it.
Never paid any attention.
I'm oversimplifying it here when I say they're the same, right? Because when you have cell reproduction nowadays, there is a loss of what they call the telomeric length, because cells don't live forever, right? So there's some sort of thing.
Yeah, you have always what you have is mutation. So
well, it's not a mutation. I wouldn't call it a mutation, because mutation is something different. It's when part of the code changes, so the phenotype changes. That's what a mutation is. In this case, it's like the cell is dying. It basically can only duplicate itself so many times before it dies. So when it duplicates itself, there's like one of them that's younger. This is just to distinguish this simplistic model from what's actually going on, just to make it clear that when I say that this original life, duplicated itself perfectly, it was perfect back then because of how simple it was. But now that it's gone so far down the line that cell duplication is not perfect for anything other than the most simple cells. And even that, but they're nearly the same, right? So once that duplication has happened once, it'll happen again and again and again until there's no more base elements to colonize. Does that make sense?
Well, the base elements to colonize, no. The latter part doesn't make sense.
Well, first you have the mixing.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the precipitation of a self-replicating organism. Then you have the proliferation of this self-replicating organism, because it will duplicate itself spontaneously. Yeah,
but what you're forgetting, in my view, is that the error codes that are made with duplication eventually lead to, how would you say, mistakes that will change. So if at some point, like, you have this reproductive system, it will lead to a change in how it will look genetically, or even like RNA based or whatever.
I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that at all, because
that's basically where we have then we have the process of evolution.
You have to understand that there's only 20 amino acids and that they're the same, right? So yes, the configurations of RNA and DNA and et cetera can decay with time, but they're only drawing from a very finite set of ingredients to build themselves up, right? Like if you look at the double helix, it's as adenosine, guanine, thymine. I forget them all, but there's only four. There's only four in it, basically. So it's all just recombinations of a basic set of four. I'll try to find the actual list here. I don't have them memorized.
Yeah, but Jenny, I'm really out of my depth. If we're talking about like the actual process of replication, somebody.
Well, all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to debate with you. I'm trying to get you to understand the thought process. It's a step-by-step thought process where. Yeah, so there's, adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. Those are what they're called. So that's the building blocks for more complex things like DNA and RNA. So do you understand that once there's one cell and it duplicates itself once, and then it can go, those two new cells can go on to duplicate themselves again, making 4 and then 8 and then 16. What that is called is colonization.
Okay.
So this colonization process will continue until there are no more materials in the environment available. And that's called the limiting reactant, right? So if you need phosphorus to do this duplication, and the duplication process consumes all the phosphorus, it will eventually stop, right?
Yeah, but the question is there actually a limiting principle then? I mean, maybe there's just enough stuff out there to always replicate or duplicate or whatever.
Well, the Earth is finite. So
Yeah, but
there's that
but it
limit.
is like a large resource.
It is, but it's finite, right? So, I mean, it's possible that like the first time life arose, it literally covered the entire globe in the process because it had no competition, right? I don't know, I wasn't there, but it's possible, right? So it's
Well,
not about
yeah, but you're talking about life like it's one thing. So because you have all these errors in duplication, you have different kinds of organisms that will feed on each other and keep each other in sort of like balance. So it's not like one thing is gonna eat everything up. It's not like Pac-Man.
well, I'm doing it step by step. So this is just one of the very first steps. We only have one type of life now. And then over time, once this initial colonization is finished and there are no more available elements to do this recreation, recombination, cell duplication thing, there will be pressure on this system to evolve because of the finite resources, right? Which is what's going to start to drive your evolution process. And you'll have a survival of the fittest type of thing. So
Yeah,
maybe one of those
but I think
cells.
before the colonization is complete, the errors in duplication have already begun to start. So
You're probably right.
I-
You're probably right. So we don't know how fast the evolution happened at that stage because it would be hard to model that type of situation. So we don't know exactly what happened, but what you're saying isn't wrong. It's just that when we look at these kinds of problems, we have to look at a bunch of different solutions and choose the solution which requires the least amount of energy, because there's something called the least energy principle, which is that systems will reconfigure so as to reach the maximum entropy state as quickly as possible, which is what's driving evolution. Because the first
yeah,
pass,
but I have trouble with your use of the word entropy. I thought entropy means decay, right?
entropy is the tendency of disorder to increase over time. And the way to look at it is that through a conceptual aid called quantum states, and those are not necessarily physically adjacent, but they can be. They're something you would study in a course called statistical thermodynamics, of basically modeling things as distributions of point particles. And what you do with that is there's a teaching that says that the average temperature is going to tell you information about the average kinetic energy of the particles, which you can then estimate what the lowest entropy state is relative to the parameters, the physical parameters of the system, because what the maximum entropy state is always dependent on the system itself. And so the maximum entropy state for like a cup of coffee, if you made a cup of coffee and then you put it on the desk, the maximum entropy state for that would be when the coffee water, the liquid, reached the same temperature as the environment. And the criterion for judging that you've reached the maximum entropy state is that there's no more change to the system unless you put energy into it.
Well, what I would say is that organisms have a tendency for efficiency. So the reason why why we don't have any extra things or any things that are unneeded is because the body needs to conserve energy. We need to have everything like everything that we have, even our brains, because they require so much how would you say, energy. We need to have a payoff for that. It has to be advantageous to have big brains. And the moment they're not advantageous, as we've seen in, for example, Flores, where we have this like really early example of like Homo erectus or something of the sort, like this primitive ape man type of human, very small. When people become small, you also see this actually in pygmy peoples in Africa. They become small.
I get it.
To conserve energy.
I get it. I get it. Yeah, we're increasingly more efficient machines. Like we're very good at increasing entropy because our digestion is very good. That's why we have to eat so much. And the when you're talking about intelligence being selected for or against, that's a bit more complicated because humans as a species, I would argue, within the context of other animals, were selected for intelligence in our early days. Like the smartest of us learned to hunt in packs and had a better survival, and then sort of went into a more intellectual type society as a virtue, as an ideal, right? So that's one pressure, but then there's other pressures, right? Like there's the desire, there's the desire to be a degenerate, right? There's the desire to like be short term and not build virtue, but rather just go with your senses. So there's sort of more than one force in humans. So you can't just say, yeah, we're only selected for intelligence because different groups of humans, this like quote intelligence things has manifested in different ways. / within human groups, we're not always selected for the same type of intelligence. So as a species, yes, but then within humans, it's much more complicated, right? Because you have things like culture.
Oh, definitely. And it's very difficult to distinguish the cultural factors from the genetic ones. I also think, I mean, because humans separated from each other relatively early, that's about 150,000 years ago. I don't think the differences genetically are particularly that big. I think they're largely very superficial. And they pale in comparison, for example, with different kinds of chimpanzee groups. I mean, bonobos and chimpanzees separated about 1.1 million years ago. Other chimpanzee subgroups that we can't even distinguish from each other with the naked eye sometimes have separated about 500,000 years ago. So I think we are quite close genetically, and therefore I don't think the difference, even though I know there are some differences, will be all that huge.
Okay, I don't know what you want me to say to that. I mean, it's relative to what your comparison set is, right? So you're basically saying on the one hand, you can't relate in any way to Islam, but on the other hand, you're saying all the humans are basically identical, which would appear to be contradictory.
No, well, one is cultural factors and the other's genetic factors. I mean, you can be cultural very dissimilar. Look at people from the Caucasus and people in Europe. Very, very similar genetically, but very different culturally. So it really does have an impact.
Well, sure. I said earlier that ideology can change culture. There's no question about that. But there's a limit to that. How much that can actually change culture. Which is
Gandalf White is saying that I have zero understanding of genetics. Thank you, Gandalf. Friendly as ever.
Well, people aren't exactly taught about these things. So if they're confused, it's unsurprising, really.
Well, I never said I was a great expert on genetics. I'm a very humble man.
I don't expect you to think you're. I didn't expect that you're an expert. I just wanted to kind of tell you what the thought process was and how I came up with my theory. Because to me, it's all about cause and effect. It's this caused this, which caused that, which caused that. And even if I don't know the exact mechanism at the time for a transition, I have enough information to know that a transition indeed happened. And that will allow me that will facilitate a model, which I can then use to go back and get a clearer picture of how the transition exactly happened. But the real trick is understanding what these leaps in complexity were, how they were precipitated. So the main argument that is against the evolution by natural selection is that it doesn't explain what's called punctuated equilibrium. So evolution by natural selection is logically unfalsifiable because there's no way that it could be wrong. The question is not whether it's right or wrong because it's unfalsifiable. It must be correct or true. It's a logically consistent argument, as in not that it's correct, it's just the logic is fine. It's a question of how much does that process influence the overall picture.
Well,
that's the question.
When Popper wrote that about your friend Popper wrote that about evolution in the 20s. I think he didn't consider how much we know now and how much we could know. So, for example, all the different Earth layers that we can date with different methods, our whole conception of geology just the fact that we won't find very strange fossils in certain earth layers, and that we always find, like, if we're looking for something, like, let's say I'll be looking for Homo erectus, we just have to look at a certain earth layer, otherwise we can't find it. I think that does imply that it does have some, it does, it can be falsified. So, because if you say, like, oh, I'm gonna look for, I don't know, like a Homo erectus in a billion,
it's not about whether
in 7 million years Earth layer, then you wouldn't be able to find it.
It's not about whether it can be falsified. It's about whether it can be tested. That's the criterion for scientific admissibility, is whether it's testable and whether it makes predictions. True things are unfalsifiable, because all unfalsifiable means is unable to be proven wrong. So if something can't be proven wrong, it's logically correct, but that doesn't make it a universal true thing, right? So if I say,
but it's a hypothetical
that's what
system,
JF said. It's not hypothetical because my model makes predictions, so it's actually quite real. But if I said, all purple ponies have blue ears, that's a logically consistent statement, but it doesn't make any predictions. It's therefore worthless. But if I say
that is
gravity,
true, but I think you're misunderstanding what JF.
I understand perfectly fine I understand perfectly fine, and I understand what the argument is against my position. I'm just saying science, real scientific laws cannot be falsified. That's why they're laws.
Yeah, but what we're meaning with falsifiability is that in theory it could be proven false. So you set up conditions.
In theory, anything could happen. Up could become down tomorrow in theory. So that's really stupid. What you want is for something to be testable and to make predictions.
Yes,
and that
it's testable. It's testable. So it potentially could be falsified.
Yes, so all my theories are testable. All my theories are testable as well, and they actually make the predictions, right? So there you go.
Okay, can we, for example, what I found fascinating is JF's example about the purple ponies farting, and every time they fart, they create a dream, right? You can make a statement like that. You can even
sound like a fucking idiot, right?
Yeah,
because
but, I mean, but what objective criteria would you say, like, all right, it doesn't, you can make a very elaborate system in your mind, and you can give all these explanations. Well, this is because that it's this kind of fart, and that's why it's this kind of dream. But at some point, it needs to be empirical. It needs to be testable. And the reason why it's not testable is because it's not there. There's nothing to observe. There's nothing to test. And sometimes I have the idea that with your sort of explanations, as creative as they are, it's not really succeeding in passing that test of empirical verifiability.
Well, you don't even know what my theories are, first of all. Right.
Well, the dream thing, right? So if we're going for the dream, right? You say that the quantum computer, your hypothesis quantum computer, predicts dreams.
It does, yeah. Would you like to know how?
Well, yeah, maybe you can give me a rundown.
Okay, so mine's a quantum computer and has 3 cognitive imperatives in humans. That is its own existence, its own safety, and its own merit, which is a sort of a self-confidence to have the will to participate in life in the first place, right? So those 3 beliefs are what your consciousness, your subjective consciousness projects. So you've never been awake and believed that you weren't you, have you? Has that ever happened to you?
No.
Yeah, so you've always been you. And that is the main purpose of consciousness, is to separate you from the environment such that you can protect the physical thing that allows your consciousness to exist in the first place. Because if you didn't have any sense, like if you just imagine it hypothetically, imagine we didn't have this isolated self, we wouldn't be able to tell the difference between ourselves and other people, right? So this is something that you can argue came about because of a biological need, right? Like our survival strategy is believing that we have a ego, or believing that we have a personality.
And the sheer fact that you are not tied to anything else. in a very real sense. You're like an isolated organism to some extent.
Exactly. So this belief is crucial to our survival because we imagine the opposite, and it's an absurd situation. But if you just imagine yourself with a bunch of other humans and you can't tell the difference between your own consciousness and theirs, that's going to cause death pretty quickly, don't you think? Because if you can't tell where you are, you're probably going to, step off a cliff or something, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. But I think that distinction happened much earlier than.
Yeah, of course. I mean, even some animals have a sense of self. So this isn't unique to humans. But for dreams, we're just going to focus on humans. So this is where it starts. Now, the additional part of it is to understand that the mind has energy in it. And energy is a very abstract thing. It's the capacity to do work. So it's hard to define energy precisely, but basically it's the capacity to do work. So the sun has a bunch of energy and it does work on Earth, and then we get some energy, and then we do work on food, and we get some energy from that, and then it's like a cycle, right?
Yeah, but the word energy, because it's almost like a family resemblance word. If you know what I mean. I mean, there's also like lots of different meanings in the word energy. We use energy as something that is like very subjective if you use it in the sense of science, but none of these energies are exactly the same.
So because you don't have any initiation into electromagnetic field theory, the best way that I can explain it to you is the mind possesses energy. So all you'd have to agree with is that your mind has energy in it. And I think you can probably agree with that because the energy is what drives you to think and feel and all those things.
Yeah. But I wouldn't say it has a specific kind of energy in it.
Well,
I wouldn't say.
I'm going to explain to you using my model how it predicts dreams. So the mind is a quantum computer, meaning it's an electromagnetic field, and it possesses energy that it obtains from the body through the process of digestion. So if you just follow, you don't have to agree with me. I'm just explaining to you how it predicts dreams. So this conscious process is constantly there's a feedback loop between the mind and the body, right? So the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind. If you drink some alcohol, that's a body change, which then immediately changes the mind, right? I'm not trying to trick you or anything. I'm just saying, so if you cut yourself, it hurts. Immediate feedback to the mind. So the time scale for body mind is very short. The time scale for mind body is longer, but you can see how it's obvious that the mind causes the variations to the body, because if you're like, oh, I'm too fat, I'm going to go to the gym, and 6 months later you look much better, you can see that the mind can also affect the body, but that it's on a longer time scale. So there's a feedback loop between them that operates on two different time scales, basically. Sure. So given that, the only important piece of information out of that is the fact that there is energy, electromagnetic energy, going from the mind into the body. If the quantum mind is correct, then that's what's happening. Now that will eventually cause a burnout because of how much, it's like basically being zapped all the time, right? Which is why thinking too much or thinking improperly can cause the body to have what's called a nervous breakdown. So sleeping is something that we do. So the way sleeping works is that where the energy is normally concentrated in your consciousness, which is your brain, the energy goes to a different place. Your body has a way of reorienting where that energy is going.
Yeah, but are these exclusively physical processes that don't have much to do with, I don't know, how would you say, the esoteric or the yeah, I just want to know.
There's nothing esoteric in well, I mean, it's esoteric in the sense that traditionally a lot of these teachings have been hidden. This teaching in particular, I don't really think is, quote, esoteric in the sense that it should be hidden. I think it's beneficial for everybody to understand why we dream.
No, so, okay, I get that point, but okay, so you say like, all right, the way the body, the feedback loop works, I understand that, right? And I also understand that the body needs rest. I understand that
the brain also needs rest, though, right?
Yeah, because the brain needs rest as well.
This constant information, this constant energy going into the brain because the mind is feeding it information, because the mind is saying to the brain, I want to be projected this way at a later time. So it's giving that information to the brain, which is slowly changing the configurational array of the brain in order to more closely reflect what your mind is dictating, which is why, when you go to the gym, you get better health, blah, blah, blah. And the sleeping reorients the field so that it's no longer saturated in the brain. There's still a bit in the brain because it's a big, like the way to visualize it is a big sphere enveloping your whole body. So the sphere is there at all times. However, it doesn't have the same density everywhere. The energetic density is different. So the energetic density of that sphere is very, very high in your brain because the brain is like the central thing that allows you to think on the complexity that you do. And that turns out to be like the biggest energetic necessity for humans is to make our brain like work, basically.
Okay, I get that. But I think my issue with all of this is that I think it's almost like a car. You put gasoline into.
You haven't even understood the
works.
fucking theory. I haven't even got through the fucking explanation yet. So you're not at a point where you can disagree with it because I haven't finished it. You can't start disagreeing halfway through because you don't know what you're disagreeing with. So
we have talked about this.
Let me come back to actually finishing the explanation. So we have the cognitive imperatives. Do you remember what those are?
No.
I am.
Yeah, sure. It's your theory.
That's the number one cognitive imperative. Well, it's not something anybody can fight back on because the existence hypothesis is the most fundamental thing most humans experience. Right. No one's going to disagree that the mind projects the simulation of selfness. You have no examples where that didn't happen to you. You said so yourself, you've always been you, right? That's something your brain is supporting in some way.
Yes, but that could have a lot of causes. Why we think that?
So the way that the model predicts dreaming is that the I am projection is the major energetic. It requires the most energy because it's there at all times when we're awake. But if it goes on for too long, it starts to burn out the brain. Literally, all this electromagnetic energy going into the brain from the feedback loop is going to burn the brain out. So the way the body deals with that is temporarily to change the array of the field such that it's no longer in a maximum in the brain. It's in a maximum outside of the body. That's why when you're falling asleep, you can get these weird out-of-body experiences type thing. For example, have you ever woken up because it felt like you were falling off a cliff? Because I know a lot of people have had, I'm sure people in the chat have also had these kinds of dreams. So what's happening there is that your consciousnness is changing arrays so quickly. It's going from a tiny little sphere, mostly localized in your brain, to a much bigger sphere. And as it's expanding to that bigger sphere, you're recognizing that expansion as falling, which is scary, and that will jolt you back to consciousness.
Well,
so there's
why would that be the case? These could all be, how would you say, mental, just mental things that have to do with fear, right?
Well,
so
anything
that's mental can have a physical effect, right?
That is the purple pony's position. That is saying, well, it could be fucking anything. I get that, but this model is literally predicting the outcome. So I haven't even got to the actual dream thing yet, but the dream is okay, so when you're sleeping, your body suspends the I am projection. When you're asleep, you don't have this belief that you're you. It's just mostly blackness, right? Yes?
I'm not sure.
Well, mostly when you're sleeping and you're not dreaming, it's blackness that you don't remember, right?
Well,
it's nothing. It's just nothing.
Well, I would say blankness. So
blankness, yeah. So it's for a fact a bunch of time has gone by, but that your cognitive processes have shifted in a massive way because you have no recollection, and your only recollection is blankness or blackness, right?
Well, I would say blankness because you don't know if something happened. If you, after you wake up and you retrace your steps in your dreams, you can get very far. I used to do that as a kid.
No, that's cool. We're not talking about dreams yet. We're just talking about sleeping.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing, right? I mean,
it's not the same thing.
Is because
you're only dreaming for a tiny bit. You're not dreaming most of the time that you're sleeping.
Well, we don't know that.
We can, because we know that dreams happen during REM sleep, which is a near wakefulness state, which occurs only for a small percentage of the total sleeping experience. Now, it's possible to have.
I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I don't know if that's actually correct. Do you
It,
have some MRI scans where you can see that?
you want me to pull up MRI scans of REM sleep? Okay, Cops, you're just gonna have to take my word for it. Look it up yourself. The REM sleep, the REM sleep portion of sleep is small. It's far less than 50%. And I think we can all agree we're not dreaming for the majority of the time that we're sleeping, because sometimes you can wake up in the morning and have zero recollection of any dreams, right?
Yeah, but you can have associations again, and then you can remember what you dreamt.
Well, you're gifted. So I understand that, and I completely acknowledge that. I'm just speaking generally. Like, a lot of people, frankly, don't remember their dreams. So just for the sake of argument, we'll say the dreaming happens for some small percentage of the sleep cycle. And the way to understand, and it's a wave, right? So at the very beginning of sleep, you go into a deep sleep, which gradually I think it gets deeper, and then it gets shallow, which is the REM sleep. So I don't know if you know this, but when you're dreaming, you're in a state that's very similar to waking consciousness. And they know this because they measure people's brain waves. And there's, I think, 4 or 5 different types of brain waves that are distinguished by what their frequencies are. So for a brainwave can have a very low frequency, which means it has a longer wavelength, or it can have a high frequency, which means it has a shorter wavelength. And so they've studied like what these wavelengths correlate with. So if someone is thinking about, playing chess, there's a certain type of brainwave for most people that will come out of that. Whereas when you're sleeping, what tends to happen is like a slowdown. And that makes sense with my theory, right? Because it's giving your brain a rest from all the stress of being conscious during the day. Now, the way my model predicts dreams is that we understand the sleeping state to be an inhibition of the I am projection. So when you're awake, you have the I am belief. When you're asleep, it's inhibited. And the reason it's inhibited is to not burn out your brain. Now, when you dream is when that inhibition is starting to fail, right? So basically, it starts to fail. You go into a dream state, which is more like being awake than the blank state, but it's still not a perfect simulation. It's still not perfectly what it's like when you're awake, but you can recognize things, right? Like maybe you dream about a person or a place you've been. So it's closer to the wakeful state than the other states, which are the blank ones. And then what happens is the fact that you're dreaming will trigger your body into going into another cycle. So do you know how heaters work?
Heaters? No, not really.
So basically what they do is when a certain temperature is reached, the temperature goes down, down, down. When a certain threshold is reached, something clicks on and it starts to heat up, and it blows heat until another temperature, a higher temperature is reached, then it switches off. And then the room will cool down till it reaches that lower barrier, and then it'll click on again. And it'll heat it up until it's back to whatever the higher barrier is, and then it'll turn off. So it's a bit like that with sleeping. You get as close to consciousness as possible with the dream, which tells your body, uh-oh, I'm waking up almost. And then it says, okay, and pulls you back into the deeper state, which is why you have this cycling of REM sleep throughout the night. It might be good just for the audience to have a look at what these cycles actually look like. It appears that people tend to pass through 4 or 5 REM cycles per sleep, according to but I'll pull up some images so you could see them. But basically, these studies have been done many times, so it's pretty uncontroversial. Can you see the diagram there?
Yeah, sure.
The important thing to remember here is that the REM state, so this is wakefulness, and then you have deepest sleep, which is corresponding to the different brain waves, and then and you're almost awake here. This is where you're dreaming. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, so that's basically how my model predicts dreaming. Because
Okay.
everything is wave-like, so we expect, because we have a foundationally quantum view, everything should be wave-like. Therefore, we should be able to recognize a wave-like pattern or multiple wave-like patterns in all phenomena. and be able to predict these wave-like patterns based on other wave-like patterns. So the primary wave-like pattern we're looking at is the fact that the mind's a quantum computer. It's a sphere that envelops the entire body that has different energetic saturations, what we call nodes. And the main node is in the brain. And it's so powerful of a node that some people think that their consciousness is emanating entirely from their brain. Like that's sort of one of the problems of our high cognition, is that because it's such a high concentration of energy in the brain, we mistake that for the consciousness itself. But really, the consciousness envelops the entire body. And in fact, we can see that when we go to sleep, the saturation in the brain isn't even happening anymore. And that's how you can tell. You can tell that the energetic saturation has moved away from the brain because the frequency changes, and frequency is proportional to energy, which I can also show you.
Well, this is interesting. So it involves the entire body, you say, but what if you lose an arm or a leg or 2 arms and 2 legs?
So I just want to show people this quantum relation here, is that energy is the Planck constant times the frequency. So we can say, because the frequency has changed in the brain waves, that means that there's been a shift of energy elsewhere. And it doesn't make sense that the amount of energy in the mind could change drastically, because the mind has a lot of controls to keep things at constant rates. So that implies that the energy has gone elsewhere, which is exactly the point of sleeping, which is to take away this high energy focal point that's normally in the brain when you're awake, and move it somewhere that it's not going to completely burn the brain out. So that's basically it. So I think that pretty much, that's more satisfying of an explanation, frankly, than, oh, well, it's just random shit coming up from God knows where, right? This is an actual theory that's telling you that this has to happen. It does happen. The reason you dream is basically because it's a way for your body, it's a way for your mind to recognize that you're about to wake up, which is not what it wants. It wants you to go through 4 or 5 of these cycles, right? You need a good solid sleep because the brain needs to repair itself. So the dreaming is a way for your mind to realize, oh, I got to start the cycle over again of pulling the saturation of energy away from the brain, so that the brain can work on itself to get back to a good state.
Yeah, this is interesting. I think we need to have this conversation probably another time, because it's getting rather complex for me, and I'm quite tired. I was just conscious to know what do you think of the drama, just to make it a bit how would you say, a bit interesting.
The way I see it is that people love drama, and I don't think I can really change that. I would rather a situation of non-drama, but I'm aware of what's going on because I'm a social reformer, so I like to make the best of all the situations. So I don't want to say I create drama, but when drama comes my way, I sort of manage it in such a way so as to increase my profile so that more people will be able to access the teachings. So I guess it's
so
overall.
So you're using our drama for your own benefit. Well, that's pretty savvy.
Well, I really care about people, and I don't want to force people to change. And I understand that people can change, but they have to make the decision voluntarily. They have to be like, yeah, I'm sick of whatever, and I'm going to do something else. So if people want to do the drama thing, it's pretty much a human thing to like have these social kind of weird, less than optimal social things. So I see my role as like guardrails to make it as non-harmful as possible. And hopefully over time, some people decide, yeah, I want to go and learn something more deeply and disengage a little bit from the personality stuff. But a lot of people are here for the purposes of making friends because their social needs aren't being met IRL. And largely, I think that's because their friends, like they're just interested in different topics from their friends, right? So it's a bit of a combo of like giving the information, but also I guess I see the drama as politics. It's something I have to be involved in because it's so important to people. But yeah, it's overall, it's too bad that things ended up the way that they did, because when people don't talk to each other anymore, it's a bit, I think it holds things back for continuing the conversation. So I don't know if that's a good answer or what, but I really don't like to take joy in the suffering of others. And I do feel like a lot of people were badly affected by this. So I do regret that happened.
Yeah, yes and no. I don't know if people are really badly affected by it, to be honest. I think people really didn't like it. People were angry, especially, I would say, Brundlefly and OV. But OV had a lot of internet breakups already, so I don't know. I don't know if he takes it hard, if it's really like a strike in the face or whatever. But what I think is very interesting is the complete and overwhelming power of the Brundlefly. He seems to be very good at managing people from behind the scenes, and he can be a total hypocrite, and people don't really realize it. So he's like talking about the doxers and stuff like that. Well, I mean, he doxed Rodney's kids. That wasn't very nice of him.
Oh, that's the first I've heard of that.
You don't know? You don't know? Well, I got a message and I saw the screenshots. Pretty nasty stuff, right? And well, what happened all in the end? So you know basically what happened, right? The rundown of the situation.
Yeah, a few people have told me about it. I think I didn't know about this doxing the Rodney's kids thing.
No, this happened much earlier, but what Brundlefly is trying to do is to purify the community, so-called. Well, we need to get all the doxers out of it, and also the people who talk to doxers. And so that's sort of my role. So because I've been in, how would you say, in conversation with Mike, and that was sort of the final straw for me. That's why I had to be disavowed and excommunicated.
Okay.
In the end.
Well,
but
my
we have a lot of
philosophy,
doctors even in the chat earlier.
Well,
I saw some of them. I'm not going to name names, but
people should be very careful online and not give their personal information out to anyone that they don't trust, and they should be very parsimonious with their trust. And they should realize that they're essentially walking into hostile territory when they go to discuss a lot of these subjects. That's important. I think what happened is regrettable, but given like the list of the sins committed by all the people involved, to then isolate individuals as particularly bad doesn't really help. And I do think this guilt by association thing is really toxic. I never played that game because it's just not really. It's too confusing to have to keep up with, right? And I do think it's essentially divide and conquer, like. It's a social control thing, and people come into these circles because they're sick of being finger wagged. And so to expect that the same finger wagging is going to work here when people came here because they wanted to get away from finger wagging is a bit stupid. But that's unfortunately for a lot of people are just coming here to blow off steam. And if what they need is space to blow off steam, well, have at it. But to just take people on their word and to mistake virtue signaling for actual virtue is a mistake. So real virtue is demonstrable. Virtue signaling is just empty words. And you do have to maybe just spend a bit of time with people before you kind of realize what they're about, and just accept that not everybody's here for the same reason. But most people are here because something is missing in their regular life. And they're probably not sure exactly what that thing is. And hopefully if they get out and get some good influences, then they'll figure it out and they'll have a better life. I had a comment from Captain Caveman who was asking if consciousness is fundamental rather than being a product of something. The measurement limit, which precipitates consciousness, is more fundamental than human consciousness. The universal consciousness is explained by what's called the measurement limit, which tells us that there's 3 + 1 space-time dimensions per canonical order. And you can say that that is consciousness, because you could say that the periodic table is conscious of the fact that it exists in a 3-dimensional universe. Now, is it conscious in the way that we're conscious? Obviously not. And nobody's going to look at a rock and think, yeah, that's conscious in the same way that I am. No, that's foolish. There's clearly a distinction between living and non-living matter. But there is this foundational element to even non-living matter, that it is dictated essentially by measurements. These 3 + 1 measurements, which are apparent on every order, they're just apparent in a different way on the periodic table scale because you have 7 different rows of the periodic table, which is not 3 plus 1, but it's 3 times 2 plus 1, which is showing you that space and time are more entangled on that scale than on this scale. But space and time are still entangled on this scale, which seems counterintuitive because it feels like they're not entangled. It feels like space and time are completely different, but actually they're connected because we can see that the configuration of the Earth has a particular period, i.e., each year has the 4 seasons or whatever. There are some slight variations, but there's a pattern there. It takes 365 days or 300 whatever amount of days to go around the sun. So there's a connection between space and time. It's just less connected than on the periodic table scale. So yes, there is a foundational measurement limit, which is giving both human consciousness and, quote, non-living matter, quote, very loosely defined consciousness, but not the way we understand consciousness intuitively. Yes, that is the foundational thing. But to teach it that way is going to cause so much confusion that it's almost better to just teach them as separate, as human consciousness as one thing, and human animal consciousness as one thing. And then once someone understands that really, really well, you can move to the next step, which is this universal, quote, I don't want to say it's universal consciousness, but it's this foundational nature of matter to be governed by measurements, which measurements and observations are the same in quantum mechanics. And an observation is a waveform reduction. And you could say that observation is somehow connected to consciousness, right? It's just it's a way more simplified version of what we do when we're conscious. I don't know what NDEs are, Captain Caveman. But yeah, Conops, did you want to say goodbye or any final words for the audience? Thanks for coming on the show to explain or to talk about the show. Did you think my show with Halsey and JF was better than the first time with JF, though, at least?
Yeah, I thought so. I actually enjoyed the conversation. It was funny, and it was educational, and also interesting to see where I stand. And that's probably more on JF's side than on yours. But
Conops, you always say that. Just think
well, as
about
much as I disagree with him
Think about
politically, I am a materialist in that sense. I
Just
believe
think about the moon for a while. You'll see why it has to be the thing driving the cycling.
I will contemplate the moon, but I will do that in my sleep now. I think we need to wrap it up. But thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We'll talk to you later, Conops.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Really appreciate that. I've had a great time. Oh, NDEs. Yeah. So it's a good question. I've had a few, and it felt like my whole life was flashing before my eyes, which is consistent with quantum mind hypothesis because the information that's stored in your consciousness, if you die, becomes stored in a different way. So when you are alive, your consciousness is restricted to a very small physical space, i.e. the space around your body. When you die, the body's gone. So there's no anchor to hold the consciousness into this tight array. So it pops out like a giant balloon. Okay? And as it's popping out like a giant balloon, it creates a change in perspective, which is what explains this near-death experience thing. So when there's so much shock that your consciousness is changing its configurational array and expanding hugely, it's going to feel different, which is why you get these, like, I don't know if you call them a revelation, but it's sort of like seeing your whole life at once and sort of seeing what points in your life were the most important or the most pivotal or what have you. But it's because of I don't want to say unwinding, but it's because the consciousness, which is normally localized very tightly around the body, becomes less localized. All right. So, oh boy. Yeah, I'm not pro Conops. Just to be clear, I don't like Conops, but I try to be professional. You know, the same way I was with Claire. People want to talk. Cool to talk with them, even if I don't agree with them. I don't endorse what Conops did or what any of the others did. I think it's a self-perpetuating loop of drama and people seem to love that stuff. And hopefully they'll take a look at why they love it and make a decision to pursue other things. You don't have to let go of the drama completely, but if you start to build up virtue, that's a slower process, but it's much more rewarding in the long run because you get the benefit of all that virtue once you've built it all up. So R versus K. The R is the short-termism, i.e. indulging in drama. And the K is the long-term, i.e. buckling down and saying, hey, there's this thing I really want to learn and I'm going to learn it. Then it doesn't really matter what virtue you choose to pursue. The way I look at it is you should do whatever's the easiest, but you want to go in the right direction. So to indulge in things like drama is not very virtuous, but to start a path of learning in a domain like calculus, if you've never enjoyed the pleasures of calculus, it's worth a shot because it'll get you thinking in a more ordered way, but also using your imagination. If I hadn't learned calculus when I did back in university, I'd want to go and learn it now because it's so helpful for visualizing things later on, even though calculus can't possibly be true due to what's called quantum state exclusion, aka the uncertainty principle. Oh, Conops is back.
Yeah, I just wanted to get the record straight. I didn't do anything. Brundlefly took that fucking picture, not me.
Oh, you shouldn't have given it to Mike.
Blamed for production. It's Brundlefly.
You shouldn't have given it to Mike. The point is that I'm not going to say you're any more guilty than anybody else because I don't want to do that, because at the end of the day, I want to incentivize people towards more virtue, and I don't want to beat people down anymore because I think they're already pretty beaten down and pretty discouraged and demoralized. So trying to take an opposite tack of just saying whatever happened sucks. I don't want to start pointing fingers, but let's all try to get better going forward.
Yeah, but this is the narrative that Brundlefly is bringing out just to make up for his own mistakes, for his own fuck-ups, because his friends are really paranoid now. His friends, Melchi and Vox Day Respector are very paranoid of him now because they thought he was a doxer, and as a consequence, to make sure that he was, how would you say, pure and to prove himself worthy, he's going after me. Right, so all the attention will be thrown onto me, while he was actually the person who did it.
Okay, Conops. Well, I appreciate you giving your side of the story, and yeah, I think these. Yeah, I don't know what to say because I don't want to start any more drama. I want to have a peaceful situation, and I want to be a good.
I just wanted to get the record straight, though.
Sure, yeah, no problem.
All right.
No,
all right.
we appreciate that. We're very pro free speech and free expression around here as much as possible. So thank you again, Conops, for telling us.
Thank you for doing that. All right, ciao.
Hi. So Captain Caveman says non-dreaming is no different from a general anesthetic, except a part of the brain is recording time, the same part of the brain that's listening out for smoke alarms. Yeah, it's not the brain, Captain Caveman, it's the mind. So yeah, when we're asleep, we're not truly completely devoid of consciousness because that would be physically impossible. But the state of consciousness has changed a lot from when we're awake. And that's why it has different qualities, like the blankness that Conops described. And this feeling that not a lot of time has gone by, even though you can look at the clock and say, oh, wow, 8 hours just went by. So obviously there's some type of perceptual I don't want to say a perceptual problem, but it's a suspension of the more acute awareness of time. But Captain Caveman is right. It's still there because it's sort of telling your body how long it needs to sleep for, and that is connected to time. There's a certain amount of time that has to go by before your brain can revitalize itself to the proper level. So yes, in that sense, there's an awareness of time, but in the other sense of like the waking consciousness versus the sleeping consciousness are very, very different, but it's still the same mind, the same foundational mind, simply I don't want to say distorted, but reconfigured for a different purpose. So that's all very logical. And yeah, I hope it's clear to people. And if it's not clear right away, just give it a bit of time, because it's a holistic picture. And so the only way to understand it really is to get a dull version of the image that becomes sharper over time. And that's why it's so important to use your own discernment and imagination to really contemplate these ideas, and to only accept them because they have passed your own tests of logic and consistency. I know for most people that's too high of a bar, and some people need to be corralled using propaganda, but I would like to see the most people as possible convinced through good arguments, rational arguments, and just a genuine sense of benevolence and goodwill towards other people, which is something that actions define, not words. So if I had one last piece of advice for people, would be to focus less on the words people say, because those are often just wishful thinking for how they want themselves to be, and focus on what they're actually doing. You know, what percent of their time is going towards virtue versus vice? And then you get a better idea of where they're really coming from and whether you should trust them at all in the first place. So I see Domingo's trolls have showed up. That didn't take long. Hey, Elliot. Elliot thinks that ConOps did nothing wrong because Elliot loves drama. And Gandalf, it's okay that you crashed on stream. You got to get your beauty sleep, so it's no problem. It's no problem at all. And yeah, it looks like the chat has basically gone to shit. So, oh, and I've got 39 downvotes. So thanks for whoever did that. Appreciate that. Yeah, so that's about it. Appreciate everyone who tuned in. And we'll talk to you again in a later stream. Bye, everyone.